The liner America, the largest ship ever built in American yards. The biggest so far of 500 liners and cargo ships with which the government plans to put the American flag again at the forefront of ocean-borne commerce in the next 8 years. The America, first U.S.-built luxury liner, is 723 feet long with a tonnage of 30,000 tons. The new queen of American shipping.
The United States Lines, together with the newly formed United States Maritime Commission, commenced negotiating in 1933 for the building of a new liner to replace the SS Leviathan. The new liner would be designed by William Francis Gibbs of Gibbs & Cox Naval Architects, who had been given the chance to finally design his own superliner. But unfortunately, this wouldn't become a reality until the beginning of the early 1950s. Instead, it was decided that the new vessel would be a medium-sized cabin liner. Then on March 19, 1934, the United States Lines and the Shipping Board signed a contract promising to start construction within the next 6 months of the new ship. The ship would be called America, to commemorate on what was seen as the rebirth of the US Merchant Marine Fleet, and would ultimately be dubbed as the grand frontrunner of the United States Lines. The new liner would be built by the Newport News Shipbuilding and Drydock Company in Virginia. At the new yard, up to 5,000 tons of steel was arriving as the building officially began on June 19, 1938. A keel was to be laid in late August, with the launching set for July 15, 1939, and the delivery for February 20, 1940. The new ship was designated number 569, and her keel was laid at 11 a.m. on August 2, 1938. Although it was on December 4, 1938, the company's president, Mr. John Franklin, officially stated that their new liner would be named America. Gibbs was obsessed with fire safety long before the Normandy met her firing end. He decided to integrate several fireproofing features and used a fibrous board called Marinite to partition the ship's interiors, and was one of the very few liners at the time to have interiors designed by women. Fox left it up to Dorothy Markwell and Anna Urquhart to design the ship's 23 public rooms. Instead of the ship having an Art Deco style that was popular at the time, they leaned into a comfortable American style which included light-toned woods, fabrics, stainless steel accents, and ceramics. As originally built, she came in at around 26,454 tons, 723 feet long, and with a beam of 93 feet. She had 11 decks that could carry 1,202 passengers and 643 crew. Her propulsion system consisted of two double reduction geared steam turbines that produced 20,000 shaft horsepower, spinning twin screw propellers that achieved a service speed of 22.5 knots. America was launched on August 31, 1939, and was christened by Eleanor Roosevelt. The Nazis would invade Poland the next day, making it no longer optional to send the new liner across the Atlantic. The main voyage took place on August 10, 1940, keeping in the relatively safe waters of the Caribbean with some 755 passengers on board. To further protect the new liner, her name and two giant American flags were painted on both sides of her hull to keep her from being mistaken as a foreign liner. On June 1, 1941, she was requisitioned by the United States Navy and renamed the USS West Point to be used as a troop ship. Her conversion took place at Norfolk Shipyard in Virginia. The ship could now accommodate around 8,000 passengers, and her first voyage transported German and Italian servicemen back to Europe. During the war, she transported over 350,000 troops and sailed without escort ships to protect her. On February 22, 1946, she was released from her troop carrying service and was converted back into a luxury passenger liner. November 10th, 1946, and after the ship being given a multi-million-dollar refit, the SS America sailed into New York Harbor, now ready to begin her long-awaited transatlantic career. For those who sailed on her, they very much enjoyed her beautiful interiors and modern design, and was considered as the queen of the American merchant marine. Soon after, she was joined by her much faster and larger running mate, the SS United States. Despite the advantages the SS United States had, America still remained popular. She continued her transatlantic services throughout the early 1960s, but in 1955 she was changed to sailing in the tropical ports like Bermuda and the Caribbean. By the end of 1963, she was laid up due to a decrease in popularity and passengers opting to travel by air, ultimately bringing her time with the United States Lines to an end. Although she only sailed 18 years with the United States Lines, America successfully sailed 2.8 million nautical miles and carried over 500,000 passengers. November 16, 1964, she was sold to Chandris Lines and renamed the SS Australis and was flying the Greek flag. Now that Australis would be making the lucrative European to Australian immigration route, her accommodations were substantially increased, now accommodating 2,258, along with air conditioning to be more suitable for hot climates, an outdoor swimming pool, and her funnels were painted white and blue with the Lions logo. The main voyage with Chandris left Southampton on August 21, 1965, sailing via the Suez Canal and arriving in Sydney on September 15th. She then departed Sydney and headed for Southampton via New Zealand. In 1968, she underwent several exterior changes, with her hull being painted a light grey and her main mast being removed. Like many of her voyages with the United States Lines, the voyages with Chandris Lines were largely uneventful, aside from a minor galley fire in 1970 and a near collision with the Australian aircraft carrier HMAS Melbourne in 1974. In 1977, she was the last liner providing a regular service from Southampton to Australia and New Zealand. Due to her rapid ageing and high fuel and maintenance costs, Chandris Lines decided to bring her service to an end, with the final voyage leaving on November 18, 1977, and was laid up a month later. 4 months after her layup, SS Australis departed New Zealand for New York, arriving there on May 19, 1978. Her new owners placed her in dry dock, where her hull was painted dark blue, as were her funnels, but her banded tops were painted red. Externally, she looked a little like her original self. America Cruise Lines decided to restore her to her original name, America, once again, hoping to cash in on the old-fashioned patriotism. However, she was not registered in the USA, but rather in Panama. But due to some confusion in regards to the company's name, they changed it to Venture Cruise Lines. On June 30th, 1978, SS America departed New York for a mini cruise with 950 passengers on board. However, as renovations had not yet been completed, a large team of workers remained on board to make her, in some words, habitable. Many passengers rebelled due to the ship's poor condition, and soon there was chaos on board. It was a very bad start for the new cruise venture, as passengers from the moment they had boarded did not feel like the SS America was ready to sail. 6 hours after her departure, she made a U-turn and headed back to New York and anchored off Staten Island, where 250 unhappy passengers disembarked and taken ashore in the ship's lifeboats. By the time the Australis was sold, she certainly was in a rundown state, as Chandris had only kept maintenance to a minimum during her last year, as they assumed she would be sold for scrap. Thus, slowly decks had been suffering, as no caulking or sanding had been done for some time, and rust was also adding up in certain places, mostly out of the passenger side. But her forward dummy funnel rust was at its worst, and the list of problems on board was just endless. Upon her return 3 days later, she departed for her second voyage with 640 passengers on board, but it was decided during the cruise that due to ongoing problems, all future cruises would be cancelled. Sadly, the revival of the SS America proved to be a total disaster for Venture Cruise Lines, who soon filed for bankruptcy. The SS America was now left with no owner and was sold at auction back to Chandras, who purchased it for just $1 million, being $4 million less than what they had sold it for just 4 months earlier. With a small number of crew on board, she departed New York on September 6, 1978, bound for Piraeus, where Chandras gave her an extensive refit, making it ready to become a full-time cruise ship. Her hull was repainted in a lighter shade of blue, which suited her, but sadly, this refit saw one other change to her perfectly balanced exterior appearance. Her badly rusted forward dummy funnel had to be removed. It had become a danger due to the massive corrosion that had taken place over the years, something Chandras knew very well before they sold her. Upon completion, she was renamed the Australis, and she was now ready to commence Mediterranean cruises out of Genoa. She was marked as the Italian Lady. SS Australis departed Genoa on July 28, 1979 for her first cruise, but just 2 months later she was permanently withdrawn from service. She was laid up at Greece, where in 1980 cruise schedules were transferred to her ex-running mate RHMS Elenus. After her second very short career with Chandras, the once great liner would never carry a passenger again. However, unlike other vintage ships in her position, amazingly she remained afloat for over a decade. But it has to be said, throughout those years she was in a very sad condition. In May 1980 she was sold to the Intercontinental Corporation, who renamed her the Noga. Then in 1984 she was given the Arabic name Alphados, although they didn't finish adding the new name to her hull. The ship then ended up having 2 names, but technically only her port bow was the Alphados and her stern and starboard bow renamed the Noga. In the late 1980s she was sold for scrap, but luckily her buyer defaulted their payment, leaving her once again with an uncertain future. Amazingly, there was an excellent attempt to not only save the Alphados, but to have permanently berthed her at Melbourne Station Pier in Australia as a floating hotel, maritime museum and a tourist and dining facility. The Melbourne Port authorities and the Victorian government were all keen to see the once SS Australis / America berthed in Melbourne opposite the famed Tasmanian ferry, Spirit of Tasmania. But tragically, just before the deal could be complete by the Australians, plans suddenly went terribly wrong. Another company entered the scene, and the Alphados was purchased by the Thai company in late 1992 for just $2 million. But if the Australian buyers had placed their bid just a little earlier, she could have been berthed at Station Pier in Melbourne today. In October 1992, the buyer purchased the liner with intentions to turn it into a floating hotel in Thailand. They conducted an overall hull analysis, and it showed that structurally she was in surprisingly good condition, and she was given her final name, the American Star. Her propellers were removed and preparations were made to transport the liner. On December 31st, 1993, she left Greece undertowed by a Ukrainian tug, with the trip scheduled to last 100 days. But soon into the challenging voyage, she encountered a violent storm which snapped her tow cables, sending her adrift. There was an attempt to attach the emergency line, but this proved unsuccessful. The crew were airlifted off the liner by helicopter, and the American Star was left adrift to defend for herself. On January 17, 1994, the American Star ran aground off the west coast of Fuerteventura in the Canary Islands. 48 hours later, with the massive waves pounding her hull, she broke in two, with the American Star being declared as a total loss 6 months later on July 6, 1994. The liner would remain a great photo opportunity for locals and tourists in the area. The The stern section collapsed in 1996, leaving a towering bow section overlooking the shoreline for almost a decade until it finally too collapsed into the surf in November of 2009. The rest of the vessel slowly succumbed to the sea and disappeared, marking the end of the once great and strong ocean liner. The SS America had a long and differing career, transporting passengers on long voyages, cruises, and transporting servicemen during the Second World War. She was in service for nearly half a century and clearly represented that undersized and underpowered liners can also have their place in history, just as well as the title holders and the famed. Although she may no longer be piercing through the seas or docked at a pier, she'll never be forgotten as long as she remains in the memories of the crews and passengers who once sailed on her.